Welcome to another episode of the ITP, the International Teacher Podcast. As a reminder, we would like to invite all of you that are currently overseas around the world as an educator or administrator to share your stories with us. Join us for an interview and reach out via email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com or use our handle at ITPexpat for Instagram or Twitter. We now have listeners around half of the globe, that's about 100 different countries, that want to hear about your experiences. This episode coming up is a great example where I, Greg the Single Guy, am interviewing Francesca Spencer. She's an author, self-published, and has 4 books. We'll talk a little bit about those, and she's sharing stories about teaching and living in Kuwait, Vietnam, UAE, and a little bit about New Zealand. She's coming to us from London, so let's get to the episode. Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Greg, the single guy, and Matt, the family guy. We're recording episodes from around the globe to tell you about the best-kept secret in education. That's right, it's teaching overseas. We're glad to have you. Welcome to our show, Francesca.
Hi, Greg. Yeah, Francesca Spencer is my pen name. And there's reasons for that, as we'll go into. But so nice to have me on your show. So thanks very much.
No problem. I know I reached out because I do a lot of reading, and I shared a book with Kent, and we talked about it. I always look at books about international teaching, and you have read several about not just teaching, but also traveling. Let's start a little bit with Welcome to the State of Kuwait. And it's a book that you wrote a couple years back, I believe. When did you write this book?
It first came out in 2016. So it was basically, what can I say? My 2 years of teaching in Kuwait, I collected a lot of stories, as you have, because I've read your book and it's wonderful. And I just, from my colleagues and from admin staff that I was teaching and living with there, we collected these stories. And I just said to my flatmate one day, oh my God, this is so great. Somebody's going to have to write a book. And she said, well, you do it. And I said, well, I can't write a book. I can't write a book, and you make all these excuses about why you can't. And then I just sort of started jotting down the stories and the events. And anytime something ludicrous happened, I went, oh my God, and then just sort of wrote the draft. And then when I had, after, I think in that first break between the years, I had the summer break, I sort of categorize them into, I just realized they fell into some different categories. So I sort of lumped them together, and those are the chapters that I came up with. So I've got the hard copy here. I'm rustling the pages. So that was I think there's 22 chapters covering all sorts of things that I got in contact with. So yeah, then I thought, right, I've written my book, and that's the end of it. Continued teaching. And then when I finished my second year, it was been one of my sort of, I practice yoga every day. I've been a yogi for almost 30 years. So I thought, well, I'm not getting any younger, for my 50th birthday present, I treated myself to my yoga teacher training ticket in India. I want to go to India and get my yoga teacher training. So I was there, and I finished my yoga teacher training after 4 weeks. And I don't know if you remember in 2016, Donald Trump got voted in as president of the United States on the exact same day as there was a financial crisis in India. And it was the most phenomenal, extreme experience. I don't, I don't know. So that was my second book. I thought, well, there you go. There's another book. So I wrote that one. And then I thought, oh, I've written two books now. I'll better get a job because I've run out of money. So I got another teaching job, and that was in the United Arab Emirates. Didn't last very long. Greg, you can relate to that.
Right.
Um, yeah, and then I did a bit more traveling, this time through South America, and met an Argentinian man on a motorbike, and it was a bit of a romance. And that was book number three. So it was all very, not. I'm still a teacher at this stage. I'm not a writer, but even though I've written three books, it's a mindset. It's like, no, I'm just, I teach, I get money together, I travel. Oh, that's an adventure. I'll write about that, another book. So it's kind of last year, I decided I'm actually a writer. I just,
Oh,
yeah,
did
I
you
just
leave
went,
teaching then?
well, hey, we don't actually leave teaching. Teaching never leaves
Right.
us. But I just took the year out. My last job was in Vietnam, and that that's another story that I wrote about. So so yeah, so last year I just went 100% immersion into being a writer, getting myself together in that kind of doing all the webinars. How do you be an author? How do you do self-publishing? How do you promote yourself? How do you do all this stuff? And it was like being back at university. It was so intense. Anyway, so then I wrote my first novel, Jaffa, which is about traveling in the 80s. So that's kind of like where I'm at the moment. It's like, wow, I've I've decided I'm an author after all that. But that's not to say I won't go back to teaching because I do like it.
It's wonderful to hear how much you've traveled and teaching. So let's take apart a little bit about both of those. How many countries do you think you've been to? If you haven't kept track, what do you think it is? How many countries have
Oh
you
gosh.
been to?
Do you know I haven't done a count up, but crikey, it'll be
Oh,
it'll be a little bit boring to count it up now.
no,
Uh,
that's okay.
well, it's
Give me a broad strokes. What do you think?
let
100?
let's say most of the countries in Europe. So I don't know what
Okay.
that is. Let's say I lived in New Zealand I didn't actually mean to emigrate or anything. I just arrived there as a tourist and stayed for 22 years. So I love it. Yes,
Wow, that's a lot.
maybe 100 countries.
Okay. That sounds
Yeah.
good. About 100. I have a couple different guests have been on before, and traveling is one of the wonderful aspects of teaching because you can support yourself as a teacher.
Yes.
You can travel like in between teaching jobs. You can do it on purpose,
Yeah.
or you can travel while you're teaching, or you could take breaks in between teaching commitments, in between your contracts.
Yes.
I'm not sure how you do it. When I first went overseas in 2001, I've had a job continually. The countries I've lived in are sort of like my home base. And then I
Yeah.
travel countries surrounding that area,
Yes.
go from there. Is that sort of what you do too?
Yes. That's exactly right. I did my teacher training in New Zealand, but I never taught there. My whole focus was I had to find a way of funding my travel addiction. I call it addiction because I
Yes.
actually can't sit still. I cannot stay in one place for too long. I don't know. There's some kind of weird medical condition that I have.
I have the same
I got
thing.
to
It's a
move
rambling
along.
condition, right? So let me ask you this, and you're originally from the UK, but your
Yeah.
first teaching job, you did all your training for teaching. You did your training and certification in New Zealand,
Yes.
and you were a certified teacher.
That gosh, I never got the final sort of stamp.
Okay,
I think it's a little bit more complicated. You do your teacher training, and then you have to apply for like like a certification, but I
correct.
never got that. I went from New Zealand. I came back to stay with family in London straight after teacher training, where I did fill in, what do they call it?
Right.
Yeah,
Attrition is what we call it, or
yeah,
substitute, Yep.
substitute teacher.
Fill
So
in, yep.
yeah, fill in teachers. They didn't require it. And then I got the job in Kuwait and they didn't require it for something.
Okay.
And I never did that final, you know, certification. I've been teaching international for 10 years on and off, and nobody's hit me up for it.
You are in that small category of people of teachers that
Mm,
has gained experience, right?
yeah,
And it's maybe who you know, and at the right time that you landed the position, and there are schools that are looking for teachers with experience of any kind, and what
yeah,
sometimes in some cases they will, if they can, either fudge a little bit, or they will overlook the certification and look more at your experience, right?
yes, that's right.
You've had lots of opportunities that way, it sounds like. How many different schools have you been at then?
Okay, so I did 2 years in Kuwait, then I did a year in Macau. If anybody gets a job in Macau, fantastic. It is. I really loved it. Wonderful place. The only issue there is the, I don't know about you, but there's so many good things about teaching overseas. One of the downsides for me is the red tape. The paperwork is extraordinary. And I think
Yes,
it's
mountains
getting
of it.
more and more hoops. I call it jumping through flaming hoops of all
Absolutely.
the countries that you different they've all got their different agendas and all this stuff that they need to be, translated, stamped by an attorney, tied up with a ribbon. I don't know. And you
And
just say
every one
yes.
of those is a story
Yeah.
for you, too, isn't it? It
Yeah.
seems like every country you go to, you could fill up pages and pages. And I never did that. I didn't focus on one country to make all of my stories about. I had kept newsletters, and that's how I keep my memories. So
Yeah.
I'll write newsletters and put them on my website for my mom and dad. And you've written out 4 different books based on all of these experiences that you have. I guess my next question is, how do you keep track of your stories? Do you keep a journal, or do you keep an electronic and on your laptop? I know you're married to your laptop. Or do you write them
Oh,
out by hand? How do you do it?
okay. So with my South American journey, I had a little notebook, and it was literally each day was, where I was, the town, maybe the highlight of the day. But I find when I'm writing about an event, it I can relive it in my head. If I've got a note that says, and I'll go on Google Maps. If I forget what that place was like, I can go on Google Maps and find a picture and go, oh yeah, it was that. Um, but I can kind of relive it. I don't really take notes because when I feel like, oh, the story that needs to be written, it kind of it's already in my head, fully formed. If you get my drift. So
I
my
do.
book,
I understand. Yeah.
or they're not, the first one, the one about Kuwait, was definitely a collection of anecdotes and memories and, funny stories. But then the others have a form, and they almost were there in my head and needed to be written. So the events, they come out as very strong pictures. I see it with, when I'm writing a book, I see it as a movie, and then just write it as it comes.
I'm a little bit like you in that manner. What I do is if I don't have the story written down, at least I have a timeline because my life
Yes,
gets so hectic of going to so many countries, so
yeah,
many different people I meet and stories and things that happen to me. Very similar to you. These experiences draw me so far out of my comfort zone that
right,
they're embedded in my memory like it's just yesterday. And the minute we
yeah,
start talking about it, you start talking
yeah,
about South America, and I think about going to different countries, going on these different trips, which are unbelievable in themselves, even if it was
that's
just like
right.
3 days in another country. All the things that happened to me in those 3 days.
How many countries have you been to, Greg? Have you done a tot up?
I have an app that goes, and then I think I switched over to Google Maps or something where you can make your own.
Oh,
I started that a long time ago just to keep track, and
yeah,
it's not like I have a goal or anything. I think I'm around 70 countries right now. And for me, if I'm in a country, I have to stay overnight in the country. I can't put Netherlands
oh,
down
that's
because I
good.
only go through their airport. And Korea is the same way. I've gone through the Korean airport so many, Ichiban or whatever it's called. I've been through there so many times, but I've never been overnight. So I don't count Korea as a country I've actually been to or
Right.
Netherlands, right? So I wish I could, and
Okay.
I want to go to those countries. Around 70 is where I've been, and that's through my
Yeah,
lifetime,
yeah,
right? And I've gone all the way back, and I think I included, the U.S. in there and Canada
yeah.
and Mexico, which I don't always count as traveling, but that's sort of a fun thing that I started a while back. And it was mainly
Uh,
only because I wanted to add more content to my website. I had a website for my mom and dad, and I was thinking, well, what else could I put on here besides my mom, besides my note taking, what could I put on there? And over the years, I've learned how to do different kinds of things. And one was just to make a map of countries and keep track of it that way.
cool.
So,
No,
yeah,
it's definitely what I'm seeing is my traveling experiences will always be my traveling experiences. So, even though travel has changed hugely in our travel lifetimes,
right.
um, but it's still such a buzz. I still get, going to an airport, I still feel like it's the most exciting thing, getting on a plane and going to a new place is, ah, I love it.
Well, I
It's
have a comment, and
wonderful.
you can chime in on this for me. I have
Okay.
talked to a ton of international teachers and travelers and people in the education field, especially for international. And the
Mm,
one point that I have, and I always tell this to people that are looking at schools, is the smallest countries, the ones that you don't even know exist. If you get an opportunity to interview, just interview with a country that you don't even know was there, right? Like
right.
Myanmar or Burma.
Yeah.
People don't even know, can't even find it on a map. They've heard about it maybe. It's been on CNN or something. But I urge the new teachers and teachers that are out there now, I urge them to go to a job fair and interview with these schools from these countries that you never knew existed. And the
Yeah.
reason being, the least expectation that you have might turn out to be the greatest experience. It might be
Yes.
difficult. It
Yeah.
might not be an easy 2 years or contract for that, but you might fall in love with it and have the greatest stories to tell your children and grandchildren or your children to live through with you to be
Right.
in those countries, right?
Yeah. I think there's the happy accident. You've got to just allow whatever to happen. I think you can only control 50% of what's going on at any one time anyway. So when just I remember having a checklist what I wanted from a job. I had like minimum, I wanted to earn this much. I wanted I wanted to be able to walk to school. I wanted somewhere I don't know, and something else that I had on my list. I had three things. I really didn't mind which country. It was like whoever's going to offer me the job first with this criteria, I was going to sign on the dotted line. So it's that's why I ended up in Kuwait, because they just gave me what I wanted. I think it was like tax free.
And walk to
That was
school.
it. I wanted. I didn't want to pay out rent, so it was a
Okay.
free accommodation, because I didn't want to be the hassle with finding your own flat and blah blah blah. That's a big consideration. So I wanted to be given a place to live, not have any transport costs getting to and from school, and have tax-free salary. And these were my three
Ah.
considerations. So, the first school to offer me what I wanted, that was Kuwait. And I think, imagine, have a set of criteria is great, but still, be open, be flexible, be sort of a kind of, yeah, because what is it? It's a year or two out of your life, and
Yeah, 2 years is nothing, right?
it's nothing. I mean, a school year is actually only 9 months.
And it
You
goes
know,
by really quick,
it
even
goes
though it might
real
be a
quick.
difficult one. They go a little bit
Yeah,
longer. I have
yeah.
three criteria that I always tell people during
Okay,
my interviews too. And I
yeah.
have two sets of criteria. The first one is sort of fun because it describes me as a traveler too. Basically, I need to have ice, I need to have a maid, and I have to have some form of transportation in most countries. Not every country. Egypt, I did not want transportation, and here I don't really, besides my little motorbike, I don't have it. But those are the three things that I really need to survive in a country.
All right.
When I choose a school, right, when I interview with a school, the biggest criteria I have is that it's a reputable school so far. I've wanted a reputable school and I wanted a good leader. I wanted to meet the leader that I was going to be working under, like the
Uh-huh.
superintendent. If they were on
Yeah.
their way out, I wanted to meet the one coming in, whether it was
Yes.
basically not phone call. I wanted to meet them face to face.
Yeah.
And those were the two most important parts of any school. So I could live anywhere, but I really do still stick by this. I want to work for a good school, number one, and I
Yeah.
want to meet the leader of it so I can see if my philosophy goes with their personality and their philosophy.
Yeah.
So that's really hard to gauge that, but that's why the
Yes.
interview process can be pretty lengthy, right? And
Yeah. That's right. So how have you done so far?
um I think
You
I've
so
done about
meeting your criteria.
yeah, 5 out of 7. I think 5 out of my 7 schools. For me, Kuwait was a very difficult place to live, and I had a great time. I had a good 2 years there, but I had a different experience than you because I was with Roberto was my immediate boss, and I had Mario and Kathleen with me. And at the time, I also had Roberto's wife was also with us too. So it was like 5 of us that had taught together already in another country. So
Uh-huh.
that was a nice comfort zone for a nice blanket of control that I had within my own life, living in that bubble. This
Yes.
Kuwait's like a bubble.
It
And
is a
then, yeah,
bubble. Oh my God,
yeah.
it is.
Like your book
Yes.
say, it's there's things that go on there that you just, everybody has their own experience, and I had experiences there that relate to what you wrote in your book. And yet I just didn't fit there very well into that country. In fact, that school was not for me. Even though Roberto was my immediate boss, the superintendent and I did not see eye to eye at all.
Right.
In fact, she didn't even want to let me go to a job fair, and I ended up making her cry. She
Wow.
walked out of her own office. She
Oh
wasn't very
no.
well. She number one, she wasn't professional. She was like an interim. She was
Right.
not professional, and she was just a warm body there. She did not make
Oh,
great decisions. I really counted on Roberto, my immediate boss,
right.
and when she and I didn't see eye to eye, I stood my ground and I said, "No, I am going to go recruiting, and I'm going within
Yeah.
your rules, but I have to do it." So that's a long story, but it's one that's burned into my brain.
Right. Okay.
I have a black mark on resume, my CV,
Yeah.
because I only spent 1 year in Egypt working for a school. It just was not the right fit for me. And
Oh my God.
I named my book The Right Fit because it
Yes.
means so much to me to have
Yes.
a school that I see eye to eye with the director.
So tell me, it
Yeah.
was the parents and the students who were running the school. Was that right?
Yeah, at that individual school in Egypt, at that time, it was really run by the parents and by the students. And
Yeah.
by that,
That's,
I mean in every sense of the word, and
yeah. That sounds like the school I was working for in Vietnam.
yeah, it's tough to find that out until you
Oh my
experience it.
God. Insane. Yeah.
I couldn't stay with it, so I had to move and go to a different school, and I broke contract. And I'm not proud of that, but I have to own up to it. We have to be very transparent when we're getting hired at schools. They need to know who we
Yeah.
are and what we've been through.
Definitely. It's not unusual, is it? I only had the first term um, uh, that I worked in the UAE, in the Ras
Hmm.
Al Khaimah. And when people think, oh, the UAE, Dubai, they're all ritzy, glitzy, and glam, and shopping malls. No, well, yes, but not in Ras Al Khaimah, which is in the furthest emirate from Dubai downtown.
Well, it brings up a good point, right? We don't know until you get to a school, so it's so important to do your research ahead of
Yeah,
time. And no matter how much you research a school, if they meet your criteria, you won't know until you actually get to that school, into that situation, if it's going to truly be the right school for you.
that's
And if
right.
it's really bad enough, it's better for you to leave at some
Yeah.
point than it is to stay and make things worse.
I knew kind of in the first few weeks that I was in a kind of crisis where it was like the head of department of English. Within a month she just left her key in her apartment door, and we never saw her again. The head of maths disappeared. People were falling
Right.
away left and right, and I'm thinking, I've got signed a contract for 2 years. How, it's not my style to just disappear. I just think, there's other ways of dealing with it. Plan was going to be to see out the first term, kind of have a chat with the principal and say, I'm not really happy. Um, how about we see if you can get a replacement for me over the Christmas period. I was going to go down that route anyway. So it was kind of getting towards Christmas, and I sort of I was getting more anxious, about the situation, because it wasn't a happy school. It was really regimented, and so uh, trained in New Zealand. We learn how to really kind of be creative in the classroom and responsive to the children, and it really was the opposite of this. And anyway, so I had an observation by one of the principal, and it didn't go well, and I was called into the office, and they said, well, you've got to basically address this and this, and then we'll see how you go. I didn't get another observation, but the day before the end of term, I was called into the principal's office and basically told to pack my bags,
Wow. Wow.
which, if I was thinking, oh no, I've lost my job, that would have been horrific. But I actually left thinking, oh my God, that saved me so much.
It was meant to be, right? It was meant
Trouble.
to be.
Oh my God. And so, I changed my tickets. Just, it's like, it's not the end of the world, it's like, oh,
Right.
I'm so relieved. And my colleagues were quite alarmed that, I'd been given this ultimatum, and they thought it was really bad form on the management, and I was so grateful.
Yeah. Well, Francesca, I have something that might make you feel a little bit better. And
Yeah,
I've
go.
seen the same thing, and we're talking about a real reality of working at these schools. If you haven't seen the school, you haven't met the staff, you
Yeah,
land in a country you've never been to before, and you find yourself in a situation where you just need to get out, right?
yeah,
Well, there's a certain way to do that. And I like what you have said, and I like what I feel was the right way to do it was to, make it through at least to a stopping point. They stopped,
yeah,
your opportunity was around Christmas. Mine
yeah,
was around the end of the year. I left my contract. I broke a 2-year contract, but I broke it at the last day of school when I was flying out. I emailed them and said, I'm sorry, I'm not coming back.
yeah.
But I didn't leave them in the lurch, so to say. And I hate that phrase because I never understood what a lurch is. But here's what I want you to feel better about. I want to say the first or second year of teaching, the record that I have seen was 3 days. We
Mm,
had a woman that showed up, and I can't believe this. This woman was completely, it was strange. She went about it the absolutely wrong way. She showed up in Honduras the first day with the rest of the cohort. The rest of the new
yeah,
teachers came
yes.
in at a certain point so they could train and paperwork and travel together and all this other kind of stuff to get ready for the school year. And I can't even remember what she was going to teach, but she shows up and she has a roommate, and the two of them hang out for the first couple of days. The third day, the roommate shows up with the cohort to go on the local tour and then to go grocery shopping, etc., with the bus. And her
Yeah.
roommate wasn't there.
Oh,
Her stuff was still in the apartment, but she had not written a note. She had not done anything, and we didn't hear from her for the next week. The new teachers, when you show up, everybody cares about where you are, and it's like a small
yeah,
little family. Everybody's like checking in on each other. We did
yeah.
not know where this woman was. The admin of this school ended up going to police departments. They went to the morgues. They went to the hospitals. They checked the train
Oh,
stations. They checked everywhere for
because
the
it's
next
Honduras.
month. And they
People just
never, yes,
disappear.
it's
Where?
dangerous. I mean,
Yeah,
given truly, it was a dangerous city at the time, but we learned how to live down there. But this woman was there for 3 days and she
yeah.
disappeared completely. And we all thought she was dead. We really, I mean, we couldn't do anything about it. They tried, everyone tried. The locals were looking for her, everybody. This woman must have taken off or something. And we didn't find out about this until about 3 months later. She was probably, I want to say, around 50 or late 40s. She
Yeah.
had like 2 or 3 adult kids. And we found
Right.
out because they emailed the school and they said, "Hey, can we get my mom's stuff?" And the school emails back and said, "What? What are you
Yeah.
talking about? Is your mother alive?" One of the kids said, "Oh," they sent a third email back saying, "Oh, she's fine. She just decided to go down to Guatemala and go traveling. She had
What?
gotten on a bus." I swear to God, true story. You
Oh
can't
my
make this stuff
God.
up. She got on a bus without telling anybody, not even her roommate that might have worried about her. Nobody. She did not say a word. She just jumped on a bus, goes down and
Uh,
hangs out in Guatemala for a while. We thought this woman was dead,
that's
and she just
so
left.
funny.
Isn't
Oh
that
my
funny? Like
God. That's
weird, not
so
funny, haha,
funny.
but funny, weird, and
No, but
funny,
that's
yucky.
funny weird. But what
Oh,
you said about, when you arrive somewhere, your teacher mates, your colleagues become your family so quickly. And I love that. I'm still in touch with real good buddies from, my first year, and it kind of binds you no matter where you go subsequently in your lives. You can call that person because you know that you shared that time together, and it is absolute gold. I don't think you get that with many other workplaces.
that's so true, but you don't travel like
Mm.
to every 2 years to a new workplace. Most
No,
people like settle down and they teach in the same school for like 30 years and they never move, right?
right.
That's a great point for new teachers or people thinking about going overseas. When you land in a country, your cohort, especially the new teachers that are going through all of the things that you are
Yeah,
and more and different, you
yeah,
go through it together and you support each other and you connect with each other, whether you like each other or not, and you go through growing pains. But
Yeah.
I tell you what, you're right. Some of them are friends for life, and some of them
Exactly. Yeah.
you would lay down for anything.
Yeah.
I have peeps out there from all schools that I've worked at. I've kept in touch with a handful, probably from each school, and some of
Yeah.
them are lifetime friends. And I
Yeah.
totally agree with that.
I love it. So great.
Yes, you can't make these stories up. And that's what's so cool about reading any one of your books. Your stories are very well written, and these
Oh,
stories
thanks.
come to life. I think
Yeah.
you have a gift for writing and telling a story about the little things in a country. Let's go back to your books a little bit. Your Jaffa book, which is the Just Another Friendly Australian, right?
That's right. Yes.
And you wrote it
Exactly.
recently, but you wrote it back in the 80s when you lived it and partially lived it, and
Yeah.
you've written it and published it recently. I'm about three-fourths the way through.
Yes.
I have a good question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
The main character's name is Jenny, right?
Yes.
Are you basically Jenny?
Okay. Possibly Jenny is about 20% me.
Oh, okay.
She's a composite character on my friend that I met in Vietnam, a teacher mate, and
Okay.
we're about the same age. So she lived through the 80s. She's from Melbourne. And
Okay.
when we started chatting about, what bands we like, because we like 80s music, and she especially loved George Michael, which is where
Oh, okay.
which is where that strand came from. And so when she started telling me about when she went to the filming of the Countdown show, which was a pop music show in Australia, and she went to the live recording of that. And it didn't matter who the band was, she would try and jump on the stage and kiss the lead singer. That to me was the most crazy, audacious, um, kind of sort of grab life by the balls kind of image that I could think of. And that was Jenny. That was the sort of almost, I think she's actually on the spectrum. Not my friend, but the character in the
The
character that she's
character is,
based
of
on,
course.
because she's
No, I
so,
love the character Jenny though.
yes,
It's so much fun because it takes me I love 80s music, and of course you
yeah,
had me in the first couple paragraphs with George Michael and talking about
yeah.
the 80s and talking about that time period. Of course, I'm immediately
Oh,
drawn to that story. So it's just a wonderful story of travel and just
yeah.
being somewhere that you're not used to. And
The first chapter, when the the book opens in London, 1983, and that was the Wham gig that I went to in 1983. And so that's actually a memory written into the book. And I thought, I have to start there, because
right.
it was such a pivotal moment. Wham were huge. I don't know, maybe your listeners are too young, but before George Michael there was Wham, and
Right.
they kind of took over when music was bought on vinyl and played on the radio, and you went to a gig to see your favorite band. This is like they took over the world. They went on a world tour to China when nobody else did. So that was like the start. And I just thought, this book is just, it's joyous. It is bonkers. It's all those things about, traveling in the 80s, when there's no connection. When you left home, you had your backpack and that was it. There's no phone, there's no internet, you're gone, you know.
Right.
So it was
It's
kind of
changed a
real
lot, but
adventure.
it's still fun. You're right.
Yeah. Oh my God. Hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. So you kind of live by your wit. So Jenny was like, basically, when I say when I told my friend that I'm basing my main character on her, and I hope she's not offended, she just loved it. She's just such a glorious character, really big laugh, lots of fun. And yeah, so that's Jenny. So Jenny, Agatha Francis Arthur. Her
Uh-huh.
initials also spell Jaffa, which is also just another fucking friendly Australian. I've got a bit in trouble with when I published it on Amazon because they didn't like the obscenity that I'd scribbled out. I got, but anyway,
Well, you can't make everybody happy, right?
no, I know.
So I've been to Australia before.
Yes,
I went to Australia to celebrate my 50th birthday.
congratulations.
Yes, and I loved every minute. I'm a diver as well as a teacher. So when I'm not teaching, I'm underwater somewhere in the world.
Yeah,
My 50th birthday to myself ended up being in December because that summer just didn't work out. I ended up going to city of Adelaide down in the south.
mm,
I was staying at the Intercontinental Hotel, and I thought I got away from all my kids and all my families. I must have been there for probably, I want to say 2 hours, and
right.
had a breakfast while I was waiting for my room. And I'm sitting at this big brunch in the Intercontinental, and this little girl walks up and goes, "Hello, Mr. Lemoyne." And it's one of my students. And her mom walks up and says, "I'm so sorry. She didn't mean to interrupt. She just wanted to come and say hello to you. She's so excited that you're here." And they ended up being from Adelaide. So they were going home for just to say hi to family.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
And I had so many wonderful experiences. I got to dive with great white sharks. I got to dive with the leafy sea dragon was the reason I was in Australia. It was unfortunate
Yes.
because they had all of the fires at the time, right? That
Oh
was when all the fires
no.
were going on and the koalas were
Yeah.
dying. And I sat there for Christmas morning, and I have to do a shout out for this because I'm not a big stargazer, but we're talking about music from the 80s and music from the 70s. Like Wham was huge.
Yes.
Australia had a couple of big ones, and one of them was the Little River Band. I never made any connection with Little River Band with Australia, but I was sitting at Christmas time. I swear to God, Francesca, I'm sitting at this little bar in the Intercontinental about noon, drinking a beer, and I'm playing with my new camera, getting ready, taking pictures of these little plastic plants and stuff on the bar, trying to figure out how my camera works for underwater.
Yeah.
There's this older guy next to me and his girlfriend, I want to say, or his wife, I wasn't sure, and another couple. The guy looks over at me and says, "What the hell are you doing?" And I looked over at him and I said, "I'm just learning how to use my camera." And he's like, "Well," and we start talking about it. The other couple stands up and they say, "Well, can we get our picture with you first?" to the other guy. And he said, "Okay, excuse me, Greg." He goes, I'm famous. I got to do this." His girlfriend, wife, I don't know which one, she leans over to me and she goes, "Oh, he's famous. Don't worry about this. He'll be back in just a second." So he, of course, takes a picture and then he comes back. And I said, "Well, I'm sorry if you're famous and I don't mean to offend you, but I mean, like,
Right.
who are you?" And he says to me, "Have you ever heard of the Little River Band?" And I said, "Oh, the Albatross is my brother. I love Cool Change is one of my all-time favorite songs
Yeah.
of all ever." He goes, "That's my song. I wrote it." It turned out to be Glenn Chirac, and Glenn was just sitting there. He and his wife, girlfriend, were there just to get away from the fires up in Sydney. So he was sitting with me at the bar. We sat there for 2 hours and just drank and had a great time talking about life. It was so much fun.
No, that's a great story, Greg. That's
Oh,
great.
he's brilliant. And the
Yeah.
funny thing was, I said at the end, I said, "Listen, I hate to ask you this. After like 2 hours of, buying each other drinks, I looked over to
Yeah.
him and I said, do you mind if I take a picture with you?"
Ah.
He goes, "Oh, good on you, mate. Of course you can. Let's have a
Yeah,
picture
get
together."
on you, mate.
Yeah, exactly, right? What a great time. I
Great.
want to go live there. I want to go live in New Zealand at some point like you did.
Yeah. Well, hey, I heard that they're looking for teachers in Australia at the moment.
Well, we'll have to see,
That's
huh?
on my radar. So
Well, maybe
so
we'll both end
maybe.
up teaching there in some wonderful school. What do you
Well,
think?
that would be hilarious, wouldn't it? Well, now we're connected.
Yes, we are. Hey, speaking of connections, is there a
Yes,
way, if we have listeners that want to get in touch with you and maybe they can read your books, you have.
I've got my website, which is www.francescaspencerauthor.com. You can go there. And I believe if you just type in Francesca Spencer author, it comes up on Google.
Okay.
And I've got a Facebook page. You can reach me there. There's a contact page on the website. Drop me a line. Or you can you can email me direct, info@francescaspencerauthor.com. So yeah, if anybody's got any questions or they want to get in touch, that would be great. If you go to my website, there's a free book on offer.
Okay.
If you want to sign up, if you want to leave me your details, you can sign up and get a free book about how I escaped from Vietnam.
Oh.
That in the pandemic lockdown, I was actually locked down, and I escaped. So that's the story of me getting out of Vietnam.
I'm going to go to your website. I will post it at the bottom of this, at the information for this podcast.
Oh, wonderful.
You've written 4 books now, right?
I
With
have.
Jaffa being the 4th?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll put a link on there for your website so they can get to your books. I have read the
wonderful.
Kuwait book, and I have read your Jaffa book, so I will log in and try and get that Vietnam book to see what that's all about. It sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Oh my
Great.
gosh.
Wonderful. The book about motorbiking through the Atacama Desert, that is going to be re-released, I believe, in the new year. So look out for that one. That's epic. It's epic. It's a big, big story. Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to see your next book come out and where you end up going next to teach.
I know.
I hope to see you around somewhere soon. Do you have any advice for our listeners that are maybe going or thinking about overseas? Do you have any advice for them?
Oh, just do it. Just go.
Just do it.
Don't worry. Don't worry. You will always, like my mom, she will always think that as soon as you step out of the door, you're going to get killed in some horrible, tragic accident, kidnapped, held at gunpoint, whatever. She's got this sort of horror film that plays out in her head whenever I go overseas. And she seems absolutely surprised and delighted when I call and say, "Hi, I'm fine."
Good for you. Call Mom all the time. Right.
But it is not a scary place. People generally, in my experience, no matter where I've been, I have experienced help whenever I needed it, and real warm-heartedness everywhere. Obviously there's a few dickheads, but
right.
If you go with the intention of loving it, then just go. Don't be fearful. No, don't be fearful. I think that.
I love your advice, and I can't wait to read your next book, hear what your next experiences are, and I will definitely see you around one of these schools at some point.
Well,
we'll meet up, right?
So, Greg. I hope let's meet up for a beer. That would be brilliant. I'd love that.
I dream about things like that. So the beer mainly. So I love it. Thank you so much for being on our podcast, and you'll be hearing this soon. We're going to publish it in the next couple of weeks, of course.
Oh, it's been my absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, Greg.
I appreciate you being here.